They left the Apache warrior woman for dead after she lost her legs. Only a cowboy helped her.
Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Spring, 1881. Arizona Territory. The land around Copper Ridge was dry as bone and silent except for the wind, which didn't carry much sound, just grit and heat. The sun wasn't gentle. It punished. The Badlands stretched out in all directions, broken only by scattered brush, sharp rocks, and old trails worn down by wagon wheels and hooves. Near a narrow ravine at the base of slope, the ground bore the signs of recent violence. Blood blackened and crusted into the soil. Broken weapons. A torn strip of military blue. Empty canteens. The tracks of horses and boots moving fast and erratically. There had been a fight here, not more than a few days ago. And in the middle of it all, she lay still. Saka had once fought with a spear in her hand and her back straight. A warrior by the standards of her people. Respected, sharp, and capable. She had stood beside men, not behind them. She knew how to ride, how to strike clean, how to move without being seen. But all that had ended 3 days ago when a blast hit. A cannon, fired too close, had torn the lower halves of both her legs open like raw meat. They couldn't carry her. They didn't have a travois, and the soldiers were pressing in from the west. Her own brother made the cut. With shaking hands and tears streaming down his cheeks, he used a heated blade and bundled the stumps as best he could. No time to talk. No time to explain. Just one last look between them. Then he turned and followed the others into the hills. They left her a skin of water and some rawhide straps. That was it. For a while she thought they were right to leave her. The pain was unbearable. The fever came and went. On the first night, she passed out. On the second, she woke to find ants crawling across her belly. Her arms shook too much to swat them away. By the third, her skin had blistered from the sun. The dress she wore, once strong and tight, had been torn in the blast, slipping open at the chest, exposing skin that baked under the sky. She didn't scream. Screaming didn't help. When he found her, she didn't move. Wade Holt was 36. Born in Missouri, raised hard, soldiered young. Fought for the South in a war he didn't believe in. Afterward, he tried mining, cattle work, even bounty riding, but nothing stuck. In the end, he bought a small stretch of land in the Arizona Territory with the last of his pay and kept to himself. He didn't talk much. Didn't drink either. Folks in Copper Ridge thought he might have gone half mad after the fire that killed his wife 3 years back. Some said they'd seen him stand for hours at the edge of his field, just staring at nothing. Today, he was following a trail of 3 stray heifers that had broken off from his herd. Their prints cut north, across dry flats, and into the edge of the ravine. He rode slow, rifle slung across his back, wide-brim hat low over pale blue eyes. His horse, a lean, dusty gelding named Brisk, stopped suddenly near the edge of the gulch. Ears pricked, breathing slow. Wade narrowed his eyes, scanned the shadows between brush and stone. Then he heard it. Not an animal sound. A rasp. Almost human. He dismounted, hand brushing the butt of his revolver, and walked careful toward the slope. His boots scuffed the dirt. Heat shimmered off the rock. Then he saw her. He froze. At first glance, he figured she was dead. Her body was twisted, half covered in dust and grit, arms splayed outward like she'd fallen from a height. The stench of dry blood and sweat hit him sharp. But then her chest moved barely. A shallow rise, then fall. Wade stepped closer, crouched down, squinting at her face. Apache. Her dress had once been stitched with bone and hide, now torn open across her front. He didn't look long. Her lips were cracked, her eyes half closed. He could see the bindings at her thighs. Thick, discolored, soaked through in places. The wounds looked bad, but not rotting. Not yet. He took a step back. Thought hard. If he left now, she might last another hour. Maybe 2. Taking her meant trouble. Risk. Time. A sick Apache woman on his land would be a death sentence if the wrong people found out. But she was breathing. He exhaled, took off his hat, looked around once, then stepped forward, bent down, and slipped his arms under her back and beneath her knees, or where they should have been. Her body flinched when he touched her. Her eyes opened a little wider. She saw him. Her gaze didn't beg, didn't think, just held as like someone waiting for judgment. He didn't say anything, just stood, adjusted her weight against his chest, and turned back toward the horse. She groaned once, the sound hoarse, broken, but he didn't pause. Back at the ranch, the wind had picked up. Dust swirled across the ground as Wade rode in with her cradled in one arm. The house sat alone, one-room cabin built from split pine, patched in places with iron sheeting. The barn leaned like it was tired of holding itself up. He carried her straight through the door and into the house, placing her down gently on his cot, a narrow frame with a thin wool blanket and one worn pillow. She didn't speak. Her face was tight with pain, but her eyes moved, tracking the room, studying the walls, the weapons, the shelves. Wade went to work, fetched clean water from the barrel, set a cloth to boil, took a sawed-off stool, and used it as a place to set her legs. The dress had to come up. Carefully, without looking more than he had to, he peeled back the cloth from her thighs. Her body tensed, but she didn't stop him. The stumps were angry, red, swollen, split at the edges. He cleaned them with water and pine sap, packed what he could with poultice, and rewrapped them in clean strips he tore from an old bedsheet. His hands were calloused, but his movements were slow, precise. She didn't cry once. When the sun went down, he lit a lamp. She was asleep by then, or passed out. He sat across the room at the edge of the table, arms folded, watching her chest rise and fall. Sokka woke before dawn. The light barely touched the inside of the cabin. She stared at the ceiling. Her breath was slow, shallow. She reached down, touched the edge of her leg. Nothing. Still gone. Her throat tightened. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she heard it, boots outside. Not rushed, just steady steps across dirt. He came in with a tin bowl, set it beside her on the crate that served as a nightstand. Bread soaked in broth. She didn't reach for it, just looked at him. His eyes didn't flinch. He didn't ask her name, didn't explain why she was there. He nodded once, then turned back outside. That's when she said it. Silent man. Her voice rasped, dry, cracking, but she meant it. He paused at the door, didn't turn around, then walked out. They didn't know it yet, but neither of them would be alone again. The wind came up strong that morning, shaking the shutters on the cabin and stirring dust across the porch. Inside, the light shifted across the wooden floor as the sun rose. Sokka hadn't touched the food. The tin bowl sat cold by the time Wade returned near mid-morning, arms full with chopped kindling. His boots made a low thud across the floorboards as he entered, but she didn't flinch this time. She was sitting up against the wall now, propped awkwardly with her arms. Her legs, what remained, were covered by a folded blanket. Her eyes tracked him the entire way. Sharp, clearer than the night before. But she didn't speak. Wade didn't either. He set the kindling beside the stove, lit the fire, and moved to the water barrel without saying a word. When he passed her, he noticed her fingers twitch. She was trying to shift herself upright. Her arms slipped a little and she winced, grabbing at her side. He paused, crouched beside her. You'll rip your stitches. His voice was low, almost rough from disuse. She stared at him, lips parted. That was the first full sentence he'd said since finding her. He held her gaze a second longer, then reached an arm behind her back and helped her sit straighter. She was strong, or trying to be. The heat in her eyes hadn't gone out. He saw it now, clearer in daylight. Not just pain, but a kind of cold fury under the surface. Not at him, at everything. Wade pulled over an old chair, cut the legs down a year back after his hip injury made sitting difficult. He put it beside the bed. Try this, he muttered. She didn't move. He pointed again, firm this time. You slide forward. Arms here. I'll steady. She didn't answer, but she moved. With effort, using her arms and what little muscle she had left in her core, she shifted toward the edge of the cot. Her breathing picked up. She gritted her teeth as she eased her weight onto the chair. Wade held her upper back, steady but without pressing. When she was in place, he let go. Sokka sat for a minute without speaking, adjusting her balance. The back of the chair wasn't padded. Her palms rested on the edge of her thighs, or where they used to be. She looked around the cabin then. Notice things. A rifle by the door. A pair of boots turned inward. A coat hung on a peg. A long crack ran through the wall above the stove. The place was quiet, worn, and lived in. "You live here alone?" she asked, voice low, raw but firming. He nodded. She studied him. His face was rough from days without shaving. His shirt was stained at the collar. A thin white scar ran from his jaw to under his left ear. When he walked, she noticed his right leg dragged slightly. She looked down at her own. "You could have left me." "I didn't," he said simply. A silence hung after that, but it wasn't hostile. It settled, slow and heavy, like dust. Wade went to the table, scooped some food from a pot, and brought it to her in a fresh tin bowl. This time she took it, ate slow, with shaking fingers. He didn't stare, didn't sit close, just stayed nearby, working the stove, cleaning tools, adjusting the boards along the west window that always whistled in the wind. Later that afternoon, she tried to crawl across the floor. Wade had gone to the shed to fetch nails. When he came back in, she was halfway between the cot and the water barrel, dragging herself forward with both arms, her face soaked in sweat. The blanket had fallen away, her bare skin pressed against the wood floor, the cloth under her hips torn and dirty. He stopped, watching her. She looked up, breathing hard. "I'm not going to rot in that bed," she muttered. He didn't argue. Instead, he crossed the room, crouched down, and lifted her up under the arms. Not rough, not slow, just steady. She tensed when his hands brushed her ribs, but didn't pull away. He placed her gently back on the cot. Then he walked outside again, silent. That night, he built her something. In the barn, under the hanging oil lamp, he sawed and hammered wood, took apart an old chair, and used the frame to shape a rolling platform. Flat, low, with small side rails and cloth padding on the base. A seat she could use with her hands. The wheels were salvaged from a broken cart. He tested the strength by pressing down on it with his own weight. By morning, he brought it inside. She stared at it, unmoving. A second passed. Then two. She didn't smile. Not quite, but something in her face shifted. Her fingers reached out and touched the edge. "You made this." He shrugged. "I don't beg," she said quietly, almost like a warning. "You didn't," he replied. That day, they found a rhythm. He'd lift her into the seat, set her hands on the rails. She'd pull herself forward, slowly at first, then stronger. He'd show her how to pivot near the table, how to brace against the doorframe. She cursed under her breath more than once. But she didn't give up. She didn't ask his name until that night. He was lighting the lamp, about to step out. "You got a name, silent man?" He paused, one hand on the door. "Wade," he said without looking back. She repeated it once under her breath. "Wade." He left her with the lamp burning, and she sat there in the chair he made, bare shoulders reflecting the soft light, chest rising slow and even. She looked down at her lap, then at the bare tooth necklace around her throat. Her brother had carved it. She didn't know if he'd made it out. She didn't blame him for leaving, but she hadn't forgiven him either. She touched the scar across her upper thigh. Alive, in a stranger's house. No legs, no kin, no clear future. But for the first time since the blast, she didn't feel like dying. And the man who saved her hadn't asked for anything. Not thanks, not stories, not names. She leaned her head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling, and whispered once, soft, barely audible. Wade. He was the only reason she was still breathing. The days that followed settled into a routine, slow, hard, and quiet. Each morning, Wade rose before sunup. He kept a habit, tending the horses, splitting wood, hauling water. His limp slowed him, but not by much. The cattle that roamed the far end of the valley had to be checked, and he did it without complaint. He never spoke much and never asked for help. He worked alone, always had. Inside, Saka taught herself how to move again. The rolling platform Wade had built for her scraped lightly over the wooden floor as she dragged herself room to room. Her palms developed small blisters by the second day. She ignored them. When she reached the stove, she tried to lift the kettle, dropped it once, swore under her breath. The pain in her abdomen from the strain made her stop for the rest of the day. But she didn't stay still. By the end of the week, she could reach the table by herself, grip the side with both hands, and pull herself upright in the seat. Wade had added small blocks on the underside, so it didn't shift too much when she pushed. She never thanked him aloud, but he noticed she stopped calling him Silent Man. She just said his name when needed. Soft, direct. Wade. One evening, after dinner, she asked her first real question. "You fought." Her voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. Wade didn't answer right away. He was whittling near the fireplace, a piece of cedar in his hands, blade glinting in the lamplight. "Yeah," he said finally. "Confederate. Missouri Battalion." She looked at him, long and hard. "And now you help me?" Wade didn't look up. War's done. That was the end of it. But not really. She sat quiet that night, staring into the flames, wondering how a man who once fought people like her could kneel beside her cot and clean her wounds without flinching. She thought maybe he'd lost someone. Maybe that's what changed a man. She didn't ask. Not yet. 2 days later, she caught a fever. It started with sweat. Then came the shivering. By nightfall, her lips were dry and her skin hot to the touch. Wade checked her forehead once, then got to work. He brought water in small cloths, wiped her chest and face. He boiled willow bark in a pan and forced it in her mouth when she refused. She spit once. He tried again. When the fever peaked, she groaned in her sleep, clawing at the blanket. Wade sat beside her and pressed her shoulders down, firm but gentle. Her fingers dug into his arm. He didn't pull away. That night, she whispered names in Apache. Some broken, some clear. Wade didn't know the words, but one came off in Tana. He guessed it was her brother. He was right. She broke the fever the next morning, eyes heavy but clear. Wade had barely slept. "You stayed?" she asked, voice ragged. He nodded. "You're still here." It wasn't much, but it mattered. He didn't run, even when she screamed, even when she burned. He stayed. The next few days moved slow again. Her strength returned little by little. She began asking more about the land, the house, the animals. He answered in pieces. Wade had built the place himself 5 years ago. Got the land cheap after the war. No neighbors. Closest town was Copper Ridge, a half-day's ride. He didn't go often. Didn't like people. Saka asked where his wife was. He didn't answer. She didn't press him, but she watched